The air crackled with a sickening ozone tang as the restraints deactivated. For a moment, utter darkness enveloped Jack. No, no, not darkness. His eyes were sealed shut, crusted with some quick-setting polymer. That meant his captors were taking precautions, which wasn't the surprise. What had his gut churning were the skittering sounds, the rasps of breath that weren't quite human. Decades of operating on the fringes, he'd never encountered anything like this.
Specimen 13.
A chilling voice rasped.
You find yourself in the custody of the Rancork Imperium.
The voice was guttural, thick with layered hisses, but oddly clear amidst the insectal chattering that filled the background. That word, Imperium, sent icicles down Jack's spine. Of all the outlandish rumors to be true, it explained the surveillance blitz the past couple of years. Probes, comms blackouts, the whole 9 yards. And it meant whatever these scaled bastards were, they had one hell of a command structure. A rough hand, chitinous with blunt claws, ripped the gunk from his eyelids. The sudden influx of light made him wince. His vision swam, coming into focus on a dimly lit chamber, and his captors, towering bipeds whose sand-colored scales, rigid snouts, and cold yellow eyes screamed reptilian. They wore armored tunics, primitive-looking compared to the tech that had gotten him here. Still, the disruptor that had dropped him like a sack of bricks was a worry.
Your kind has been monitored for a considerable time. Your adaptability is begrudgingly impressive.
The lead Rancork hissed, the closest thing to approval he was likely to get out of it as its slit pupils narrowed.
However, it will not suffice to save you. You will provide information.
Jack forced himself to relax, a practice shift that belied his roiling tension. He wasn't some green recruit. Interrogations happened. Even the best soldier could break. The trick was making it take so long, cost the enemy so much, that it wasn't worth the data they'd squeeze out of you. He met the creature's gaze evenly. Okay, buddy. What do you want to know? The translator's flat cadence didn't hide Rancork's shock. Jack hid his satisfaction well. It looked like the lizards hadn't met any cooperative humans. That could be useful.
First,
The lead Rancork hissed, regaining composure.
the scale of your civilization. Population figures, number of inhabited worlds.
Jack shrugged, feigning casualness. Earth, mostly. A few outposts. Moon, Mars. You guys probably already spotted them. As for populations, maybe 8, 9 billion tops. The Rancork hissed in displeasure, several of the others shifting uneasily. Good. Let them get cocky. Underestimating their enemy was a classic blunder.
You hold back information.
The leader spat.
This is unacceptable. Initiate Phase 2.
Two of the guards hauled Jack to his feet and frog marched him down a sloping corridor. He kept his resistance minimal, just enough to seem like he was being dragged, not striding along. They dumped him into a metal chair, strapping his wrists and ankles down tight. The lead Rancork followed, carrying a syringe filled with a milky white liquid. Here we go, Jack thought grimly. Time to see how much juice I've got left in me.
A mild synaptic accelerator.
The Rancork said, tapping the syringe with one disturbingly long claw.
It will heighten your mental faculties and responsiveness.
Jack snorted. You mean truth serum? The slit pupils flared in anger.
Compliance will be achieved.
Its hiss echoed as its fangs bared. It plunged the needle into Jack's arm. Pain flared as the fluid hit his bloodstream. But what followed wasn't the woozy warmth of classic truth drugs. Instead, his senses went haywire. Colors throbbed with nauseating intensity. Every minute sound a harsh metallic shriek.
Subject name, rank, and unit affiliation.
The Rancork demanded, its voice a harsh blare. Jack fought to maintain focus.
Screw you.
He ground out through clenched teeth. Petty defiance, maybe, but it gave him an anchor, a sliver of control. The Rancork stared at him, its cold eyes narrowing.
Persistence will achieve nothing. You will be broken.
Suddenly, a flicker of movement caught Jack's overloaded vision. One of the Rancor guards, the smaller one, shifted its weight nervously. Its eyes darted toward the doorway, then back to the leader. Interesting. There was something going on here beyond the routine interrogation. Another dose of the serum hit his arm, this time amplifying the overload into pure agony. White fire coursed through his veins, his mind threatening to shatter. Then it was over. Blessed numbness replaced the pain. His senses dulled, a heavy blanket settling over his thoughts. Through the haze, he heard agitated hisses, the Rancor arguing amongst themselves. Whatever it was, it had bought him some time and distracted them. Every advantage had to be seized. He forced the haze back, straining to listen past the serum's fog.
Imperator's orders!
That was the lead interrogator, its voice sharp with frustration.
The specimen is resilient. Unorthodox methods.
Unorthodox? That didn't sit well. A rough hand snapped his chin up. Yellow eyes gleamed with cruelty.
Phase 3 begins. You will tell us everything.
The leader gestured, and the two guards dragged Jack down a dimly lit passageway. Fear flickered anew, not from the unknown, but a grim certainty. True, chemical interrogation had its limits, but pain? There weren't many who could endure true pain. They forced him into a larger chamber, high-ceilinged and menacing. At its center stood a cold metal table, ominously fitted with restraints. But it was the contraption hanging above it that sent Jack's blood running cold. It resembled a gutted industrial heat lamp, with cruel, twisted filaments spiraling down from its core.
This,
rasped the lead Rancor, a cruel smile spreading across its snout,
is a synaptic agitator. It will amplify your pain receptors beyond tolerable limits. There is no escape. You will submit.
The Rancor strapped Jack down to the table, his fear battling a strange, rising anger. Desperation was a hell of a motivator, but he knew that anger. That was his edge. Pain could break you, but fury, properly channeled, could forge iron in your soul. The twisted heat lamp descended, filaments glowing an ominous orange. The leader positioned itself to one side, a small control panel within reach. Behind it, the other two Rancor stood ready, their expressions a mix of pity and anticipation. Even in a society built on conquest, there were some who couldn't stomach this, a fact he intended to exploit.
Final opportunity for compliance,
the lead hissed.
Submit, and this suffering ends.
It flicked a claw across the control panel. The first jolt hit like a lightning strike, not just pain, but a soul-deep wrongness, as if every nerve ending were being twisted inside out. It was all Jack could do not to scream, to cling to the white-hot rage that was his only shield. The Rancor watched impressively.
Intensity increasing. You will...
Look at him! One of the guards yelped, pointing at Jack. His interrogator turned, and Jack forced his tortured face into a rictus grin. It took near superhuman effort, his jaw feeling like it might dislocate.
Is that all you got?
He rasped. His voice was a ruin, but the taunting defiance within was pure distilled human. The lead Rancor's muzzle twitched in rage. It looked back at the control panel, then hesitated, its claw hovering over the dials.
This is defiance. This changes nothing,
it barked. But it did. Jack could sense it. Doubt, uncertainty. These creatures weren't used to a prey that fought back, not like this. Not with this cold determination burning in his gut. The serum-induced fog was lifting, and a razor-sharp focus was taking its place. This wasn't about information anymore. This was survival, pure and simple. But within that, an opportunity flickered to life. The synaptic agitator pulsed again, hotter, brighter. Pain arced through him, his vision turning red around the edges. Yet through the haze, Jack locked eyes with the smaller guard, the one who'd shown unease before. The creature flinched slightly, its yellow eyes flicking away. There was a crack in the Rancor facade, a sliver of hesitation that could be widened.
You think you're strong?
Jack choked out, his voice a bloody rasp.
Your kind are cowards, torturers.
The creature twitched, its grip on its weapon tightening. Cowards, yes. That was the word to drive into them, plant the seeds of doubt. The lead rancor bared its fangs in fury.
He mocks us! Increasing intensity!
The agony spiked, threatening to obliterate Jack's mind. His skin felt like searing coals, his muscles bunching and quivering uncontrollably. Yet he kept his eyes on that wavering guard. This was a gamble, a last-ditch play, fueled by the same feral defiance that had kept him alive this long.
You!
He gasped through the pain.
You're not like him. This is wrong.
The smaller rancor snapped, whirling on its superior.
Desist! He is not.
A savage backhand from the leader cut it off. The guard staggered, hissing in a mix of pain and outrage. But that moment was enough. Jack's vision blurred with tears of pain, but he sensed his advantage. There was a fracture in the ranks, a fissure born of his torment. It might not be much, but it was everything he had.
He's right,
Jack rasped, pushing through another wave of agony.
Can't you see? This makes us better than you.
His voice rose with a strength he didn't know he possessed.
That we can endure this. It makes us stronger. We survive, you monsters.
The smaller guard recoiled, its slit pupils wide with conflicted horror. The larger ones behind it shifted uneasily, their reptilian impassivity crumbling. The lead rancor stood frozen, pure hatred radiating from its rigid stance. Then, slowly turned its head towards the guards, and the air thrummed with menace.
What is the meaning of this?
It snarled.
Do you falter? Are you swayed by this creature's lies?
The silence in the torture chamber was deafening. The two guards visibly shrunk back, a ripple of unease running through their ranks. They had seen Jack's brutal endurance, felt the wrongness of the escalating torture, and it had planted a seed of revulsion. Jack pushed on, his voice rough and fading.
You think we're weak? Primitive? But look at you. Hiding behind your technology, your cruelty.
A cough racked his body, a spray of blood spattering the metal table.
This is your strength? This is your Imperium?
The lead rancor bristled, nostrils flaring.
He manipulates you! Weak minds, all of you! Return to your duties!
Before the order could be fully obeyed, a sharp chime cut through the tension. The interrogator's head jerked towards a small communications panel on the wall. It blinked with an urgent crimson pulse.
Imperative message,
it hissed, fear lacing its voice for the first time. With a trembling claw, it activated the comm panel. The image that flickered to life was another rancor, but this one was adorned in rich, ornate armor, its crest taller and far more elaborate. It stared at them with a cold fury that made even the lead interrogator recoil.
Explain this disturbance,
the regal rancor demanded. Its tone was pure, icy command.
The specimen was to be delivered intact.
The Imperator cut it off with a chilling hiss.
End this interrogation at once. The specimen's presence is required elsewhere.
Relief flooded Jack like a breaking dam. He hadn't broken them, but he had shaken them. And that sliver of resistance he'd sparked might just be enough. The guards released him from the table roughly, their hisses tinged with confusion and uncertainty. He sagged, too exhausted to stand, but a savage thrill burned within him. The rancor were flustered, shaken in their belief of easy conquest. They had underestimated humanity, misjudged its core of indomitable defiance. They dragged him back to his cell, throwing him to the stone floor like a sack of refuse. But as the heavy door slammed shut, plunging him back into darkness, Jack couldn't suppress a raw grin. It might have looked like nothing more than a defiant sneer to his captors, but he knew better. He hadn't given them a broken victim. He'd given them a taste of humanity's true strength. Days, maybe weeks passed, time blurring into a haze of pain and fitful rest. Food appeared sporadically, nutrient-rich sludge that did little to alleviate his constant hunger. The rancor ignored his requests, his taunts, as if his very existence was inconvenient. They made a mistake, though. Each day that he survived hardened his resolve, turned the ache in his bones into a cold, determined fire. One morning, at least he thought it was morning, the skittering footsteps outside his cell were heavier, more urgent. The door clanged open, revealing not the usual guards, but a procession of high-ranking Rancork. The one leading the retinue held itself with unmistakable authority, its scales a richer obsidian, its crest studded with jewels. The Imperator. Ignoring the pain that shot through his abused body, Jack forced himself into a sitting position. He might be their prisoner, but he'd be damned if he'd cower. Specimen 13. The Imperator's voice carried an unnerving calmness. It stepped closer until its cold yellow eyes were level with his own. You have exhibited unexpected resilience. To that, I offer a measure of respect and a choice. Jack blinked, caught off guard. He'd expected another round of torture, perhaps an execution, but not respect, and certainly not a choice. The Rancork were still underestimating him, still misreading the situation. They saw his endurance as a fluke, an anomaly, not the iron-willed core of humanity. This was a chance, dangerous, but a chance nonetheless. Let's hear it, Jack rasped, pushing himself to his feet and swaying slightly with the effort. His pride wouldn't allow him to show weakness, not now. The Imperator's fangs glinted in the dim light. We are approaching a critical juncture in our campaign. You're kind. You possess an adaptability unseen among conquered races. We believe you can be leveraged. A cruel smirk twisted its snout. Naturally, cooperation will have its own rewards. Jack snorted, a painful sound thick with contempt. Slave labor. You want us to build your empire after everything you've done? Your defiance is predictable. The Imperator waved a clawed hand dismissively. But irrelevant. Your race's path is clear. Annihilation or servitude. Your choice influences the swiftness of your end. Now Jack understood. This wasn't a mere interrogation, it was a prelude to invasion. He was their test subject, a gauge of humanity's breaking point, and they hadn't just underestimated humanity's resilience. They'd misread their own position entirely. With a jolt, he realized the reason behind the delay. The Imperator's personal visit, the fear he'd glimpsed beneath the Rancork arrogance. They weren't as secure as they pretended. There was dissent within their ranks, a crack he'd widened with his defiance. He could exploit that. Jack coughed, specks of blood hitting the floor. If I refuse this reward... The Imperator cocked its head, a serpentine movement. Then you shall be an example. Your resilience will become a cautionary tale, demonstrating the futility of resistance. It meant a slow, public execution, a warning to break the human spirit before the invasion began. He glanced across the assembled Rancork, saw the hunger in their eyes. They wanted that show of dominance, but they'd get something even better. Jack forced a mocking smile, feeling every tortured muscle protest. Well, let's not keep your audience waiting. I'm sure you've all got a front row seat for the show. The Imperator inclined its head. Rancor guards flanked him and marched him from the cell. As they wound deeper into the complex, the tunnels became larger, grander. Here, rank-and-file soldiers stood aside, their scaled bodies rigid with anticipation. They led him onto a vast balcony overlooking a cavernous chamber. It buzzed with thousands of assembled Rancork, their hisses echoing off the high ceiling. A primitive savagery thrummed in the air. This wasn't just about Jack, it was theater, a ritual to solidify Rancork dominance in the face of internal fear. He was the scapegoat, and humanity, the soon-to-be-conquered threat. He was marched onto a raised platform at the chamber's center. As he looked out across the sea of scaled faces, Jack felt a strange clarity. Fear withered under the weight of grim purpose. He'd survived the interrogation. Now he'd turned their own stage against them. The Imperator ascended the platform to stand beside him, raising a clawed hand to silence the crowd. Behold, it rasped, its voice amplified to reach the farthest corners. "This creature represents the pinnacle of its race, weak of body, yet possessing a perverse cunning." A wave of hisses rippled through the Rancorg masses, tinged with fear and revulsion. Good. He was fanning their primal instincts exactly as planned. "Yet even this resilience is pointless," the Imperator continued. "They will break. They will submit. Or they will perish." It turned towards Jack, fangs bared in a chilling grin. "Do you submit, Specimen 13? Will you offer your world's surrender?" Jack met its gaze, his chin held high. In a voice thick with exhaustion but ringing with clarity, he replied, "We'll do a hell of a lot more than resist. We'll hunt you down to your damn lizard holes, make you regret ever setting eyes on Earth." A ripple of unease swept through the crowd. The Imperator's eyes flared and it lunged forward, jaw snapping. But something was off. The Imperator's strike was too slow, its movement clumsy. Before Jack could react, a blur of scaled bodies surged onto the stage. The two Rancor guards he'd recognized from the torture chamber had launched themselves at their leader. Chaos erupted. The Imperator snarled, reptilian reflexes fast, but its blows lacked their usual devastating precision. The rebel guards moved with surprising coordination, one flanking the Imperator while the other darted under its guard, raking its claws across the Imperator's underbelly. The cavern throbbed with a cacophony of roars, hisses, and the clash of metal. Rancor loyalists poured onto the stage, descending on the rebels, their disruption weapons flashing. In the pandemonium, Jack staggered back, heart pounding. This was his chance. The guards flanking him whirled, startled by the uprising. Seizing the moment, Jack headbutted one, slamming his skull into its snout with a sickening crack. The creature reeled and Jack darted around it, snatching its discarded disruptor. He didn't hesitate. Leveling the weapon, he fired at the Imperator, locked in a desperate struggle against the rebels. Jack's shot struck the Imperator's shoulder, spinning it around. With a howl of agony, it dropped a clawed hand to its wound, momentarily distracted. The larger rebel seized the opportunity, lunging forward and sinking its fangs deep into the Imperator's neck. The Imperator's scream cut through the din, a chilling shriek of fury and pain. It thrashed, flinging the rebel off, but blood spewed from the terrible wound. Jack fired again, targeting exposed flesh. The Imperator roared, staggering as the disruptor blast scorched its leg. Loyalists finally surged past the rebels and tackled Jack, knocking him to the ground. Claws tore at his flesh and pain bloomed anew, but the sweet scent of rebellion filled the air. The Imperator was faltering, its eyes filled more with bewilderment than fury. A rebel, its scales spattered with blood, hauled Jack to his feet, hissing urgently,
"Come! The tunnels! We can escape during the chaos!"
Jack looked down at the dying Imperator, writhing on the stone floor. He had done this, ignited the spark of rebellion, turned their arrogance into a fatal mistake. Survival was no longer enough. With a savage grin, he followed the rebel into the depths of the Rancor complex. It was time to turn the tables on the hunters.